Hey guys, before we get into the video, I just wanted to remind you to leave what you think in the comments below. I'm looking for opinions on my lore. Also, anything I have written thus far is subject to change, if I think of a good enough reason to change it. Also, I want to thank my editor and voice actor. Alright, let's start. Being a very private people, it's not surprising to learn that the Akluth carry their privacy into religion. It's very taboo to discuss religion with others if they are not a priest. This also applies to the Akluth, who try their best to adapt to the religion of the land they migrate to. They'll attend services and such, but they'll never involve themselves in theological debates and the like. To the Akluth that keep their home religion, what has been found from observing them is daily. They will go to an established, peaceful place and meditate for a couple of hours in the day. What they meditate on is not known. To be an Akluth is to be a warrior. From birth until they cannot move anymore due to age, they are constantly fighting, much like the Chun. What separates them from the Chun, however, is that they do not rely on sheer brute strength. Akluth not only exercise their body, but also their mind. Daily, along with their exercise, they study the art of war itself. They claim that this love of warfare is because back home there is never a moment of peace. Their country is constantly at war, but with whom and why is never revealed. There are few clues into how their society operates. From time to time, dwarf merchants interact with the Akluth inside the borders of the human empire along river ports. They buy slaves off them and import them back to their homeland. Akluth, according to the dwarves, are their biggest buyer of slaves. It is to be assumed, and the most widely accepted answer agrees, that the Akluth import a large number of slaves to do the work they themselves don't have the time to do, such as farming or construction. For some auspicious reason, the Akluth have migrated to Alluvium en masse. Many of them act as mercenaries, and the most talented out of all of them elevate high enough in society to become generals or advisors. The humans have nothing but distaste for them, seeing them as a bad omen, coming from an island forsaken by the gods. Dislike being caused by rumors and high tales perpetuated by sailors who have come in contact with the Sun Elves and hearing it from them. When the war first kicked off, the Akluth were feeling nothing but contempt for the humans, but their fear towards the Chun destroying their work possibilities drove them to stay neutral. They still continued their mercenary work through the Murk Guild that they had created. The guild got so huge throughout the war that it started to gain massive influence, and eventually a guild hall could be found throughout every location in the human empire. Taking advantage of the chaos caused by the war, many Akluth got very wealthy, working for the guild, which is how it was able to have such a quick rise to prominence. Throughout the empire, but especially in Inglesville, due to the complete breakdown of the government, many local lords or governors relied on paying mercenaries to protect them from the Chun. They could not do this in money being issued out of Regulbium, however, so in many cases, they'd print their own money, or use the dwarven currency. Effectively, they became independent states. The only thing that kept them part of the empire was because they said they were. One of the most famous stories to come from the war is a company of mercs called Absiois. To those who believe mercs have no honor, have not heard of the tale of the final stand at the Corains. Their story is recounted in a manuscript later written by a survivor of the destruction of the city. It says thus: I had arrived here with my team after only a couple of days. According to intel, all government administration and services have completely broken down. As a result, the locals have turned to the landowners for protection. The bastards in Regulbium have just retreated their ancient homelands and left their subjects to die in Inglesville. Luckily, the guild has stepped in to provide protection, for a fee, of course. We were protecting these people, and it still hasn't earned us a single bit of gratitude. We were still turned away from pubs, inns, brothels, you name it. Luckily, no one gave a shit if we took up residence in the old barracks. I suppose their distaste for being abandoned by the Empire overturned their distaste for the Akluth. Our contract stated we need to protect the city at all costs. No exceptions. For a while, all was quiet. We had heard stories from the front about Empire's legions being absolutely thrashed, and how the Seed had officially entered the conflict, leading the Chun through the forest. The treatment we suffered under humans really didn't help with the empathy for them. But then we heard reports of the famous General Al-Tha'ban. He was ruthless even for the standard warfare set, burning entire cities to the ground. Entire generations lost at the order of this monster. To call him a barbarian would imply that he was ignorant and daft, which wasn't the case. One by one, once prosperous trade cities would simply cease to exist, delivering a decisive blow to the Empire's economy. It was obvious to anyone paying attention that he understood what he was doing. The boys and I were just glad he was doing it at a distance and not near us. Ironic, because one day we got survivors from Inglesfillian Rebellion yelling at the gate, begging to be let in. We gave the order, and by the gods, words could not explain the absolute strife those men went through. They came from an entire legion, with maybe only 3 cohorts left. To see a man with all his limbs was a rarity, and you'd think some of them were born red. When the captain asked the centurion what happened, we all basically shat our pants. Al-Tha'ban is behind us, and we have maybe a couple of days. You could not have given a better sentence to have the entire town rushing to throw up spikes. We must have gone a whole day and night without sleep, rushing to do what we could to prepare for a long-lasting siege. The cohorts, who originally agreed to stay, left in the middle of the night. This threw the entire town into a panic, now left with only our company to protect them. Now most in our position would have fled too, but as you know, an Akluth never backs out on their word. Our contract clearly stated what was required of us, and we intended to uphold it. These people who once chastised us, belittled us, were now behind us, as we were the only thing between them and certain death. So we got to work constructing choke points and blocking off alleyways to try and sway the Chun to attack us in a narrow street, as well as try to evacuate as many people out of the city as possible. Crowd control was difficult, but we managed to get a sizable amount of civilians out in an orderly fashion. Just as the last few were leaving, we heard it. A horn sounded out from the horizon, coming from the direction the people were escaping from. Next thing I knew, I heard screams and the slashing of steel against flesh. Acting quickly, we tried to redirect everyone back into the city and prepared for a siege. As the last ones re-entered the city, we saw him, Al-Tha'ban, approach the main gate, asking for parley. This was extremely out of character for Al-Tha'ban. He usually attacked without warning and burned everything in his path, no questions asked. To extend his arms and gesture meant something huge. Do tell me, Al-Tha'ban started, how is it that a bunch of Akluth, hated by the citizens of the Empire, become their guardians? Unfazed and frankly unimpressed, our captain responded. Simple. They offered a job, and we accepted it. Al-Tha'ban laughed. Surely it can't be that simple. Is it the money? We don't have to fight this day. I can offer you as much as you and your men would ever want from the loot we obtained from taking the cities. You and your men would just simply have to stop. Cutting him off mid-sentence, the captain responded, with all due respect, when you live in a land that has ripped everything away from you, your rights, the very essence of who you are, and treats you no different than one would treat a dog, the one thing they never take, the one thing they could never spit on, is your word. Now, I gave my word, my honor, on the fact that I would protect these people. You could offer me double or even triple what my men and I have been paid, and I'd still turn you down, for the one thing you can't buy back is your word. And without uttering another word, the captain turned to the man next to him and ordered continued preparations for a siege. Every man I was with that day understood that they would most likely die.